Beef jerky might be one of the biggest ripoffs in the grocery store. And after looking at 4 popular brands under a microscope, I think I know why. We're paying anywhere from $8 to $15 for a bag of dried freaking meat. But does paying more actually get you a better product? Or are we just paying for better marketing? I mean, come on, are we paying Slim Jim to keep hiring these professional wrestlers? Are you ready? Because I'm about to show you the evidence. And our first clue came when I pulled them apart. And almost immediately, I noticed something. All right, let's start with Old Trapper. I'm gonna show you guys something. I'm gonna take a little piece right here. I'm gonna tear it. I'm looking for strands. That's what I'm paying attention to. Real cuts of meat have a grain to them. So when you pull them apart, they usually don't snap in half. So next up is Tillamook. And to be honest with you guys, this was my favorite as far as taste. Pull it apart here and see all those fibers right there? That's a good sign. Nice, very nice. One more pull here, and there you go. All right, so next up is Jerky. And just remember, guys, how each one pulls apart. This looks like a hefty piece of beef right here. So you see how it just came apart pretty easily here? But I do see fibers, that's a good sign. And it's very dry. Check that out. One more pull here and across the grain, but it breaks right there. That's a good sign, it's a big piece of meat. Okay, here's great value. And this is a discount of the beef jerkies, but check this out. Like it's folded in half like a piece of paper, but come to find out, it looks like it was split right down the middle with 2 parts were fused together. But overall, guys, for the price, this looks pretty good. And you can save a lot of money if you go with great value. And no, I'm not being paid by great value. Okay, here we go, Slim Jim. This is scary. And of course, Randy Macho Camacho, a lot of commercials with this guy. But check this out, watch this. It snaps, and it's not supposed to do that, so I'm not sure what the hell is in here. Let me try to tear it apart for you guys. So there you go. You see that? The skin's coming off, if you want to call that skin. And I'm trying to split it in half, but it just turns to mush. Okay, check this out. 5 different products and 5 completely different tear patterns. Old Trapper and Tillamook had some really impressive muscle fibers. Jack Link's was dry as hell. Great Value honestly looked better than I expected. And then there's Slim Jim. Before you guys light me up in the comments, I know it's not technically beef jerky, I know, but let's be honest, most people throw it into the same category, and I don't know why, but they do. And it was completely different, and that was my first clue. But if these products were tearing this differently, I had to know why, and I think you guys do too. Alrighty then, we're at Old Trapper, 40 times magnification, and this is one tiny strand from this bag, so it's pretty amazing. One thing I want you to pay attention to is these long strands running across the slide. Those are muscle fibers, and that's important because beef isn't one solid piece of material. It's made up of thousands of tiny bundles of fibers. The more of those fibers stay intact, the more likely the jerky is to pull apart into strands instead of simply breaking apart. Okay, so now I bumped it up to 100 times. Check this out. You see those dark spots right there? That's fat. And honestly, that's not what caught my eye here. Look at these fibers. Remember the tear test? This is exactly why Old Trapper pulled apart the way it did. So now we're at 400 times, and this is where things start making sense. Notice how these fibers are all running in the same direction? That's the grain of the meat. When jerky is made from whole cuts of beef, those fibers tend to stay organized. And that's one reason this jerky pulled apart into long strands instead of just crumbling apart. Okay, this is 1,000 times, and honestly, this is pretty damn cool. You can still see those fibers. That's crazy when you think about everything this meat has been through. It's been sliced, seasoned, smoked, dried, packaged, and sitting on a grocery store shelf. And yet, the structure is still there. So you know what, folks? Old Trapper passed the test. Alrighty then. Here we are, Tillamook at 40 times magnification. And the first thing that stands out is the size of these muscle fragments. Instead of a uniform mass, we're seeing large sheets of tissue that still retain their original structure. And that's good, right? The fibers appear layered and surprisingly intact, suggesting that the meat wasn't completely broken down during the processing. Already, Tillamook is showing one of the strongest and most recognizable muscle patterns we've seen so far. So, at 100 times, the story becomes a little clearer. Those large pieces of tissue we saw at 40 times are starting to separate into distinct muscle bundles. You can actually follow the fibers as they run through the sample, almost like the grain in a piece of wood. And I have to admit, this isn't what I expected from a big bag of beef jerky. I expected a much more processed appearance. Instead, Tillamook is still hanging on to a surprisingly organized muscle structure. That's a good sign if you're looking for something that still resembles, actual beef. So 400 times, Tillamook is still holding its structure together surprisingly well. And that's important because the more processed a product becomes, as you well know, the harder it usually is to recognize the original tissue. Take, for instance, a hot dog. So these long, continuous fibers suggest that this meat has retained much of its original structure. So far, Tillamook isn't looking like a heavily processed meat. It's looking like strips of dried beef that just happened to have been stuffed into a bag and sold for almost 13 bucks. Ouch. At 1,000 times, we're close enough to appreciate some of the finer details. But here's a bigger question, you guys. When companies throw around words like premium and high protein, what are we actually paying for? Because under the microscope, Tillamook is showing us something interesting. The muscle fibers are still organized and easy to recognize. And honestly, that's probably the most convincing evidence we've seen so far that this started as an actual cut of meat and not a mystery meat science experiment. Okay, here we are 40 times with the Jack's Lynx. And already, this is telling a different story, you guys. The tissue appears denser and more compact than what we saw with Tillamook. The large, easy to follow muscle sheets are starting to disappear, and the sample looks much more compressed. Okay, and before anybody starts a food fight in the comments, that doesn't automatically mean better or worse. It just means different. So here we are, folks, at 100 times. Jack Lynx, it really starts to separate itself from Tillamook. Instead of those long, clean muscle fibers like Tillamook running across the whole slide, this sample looks much tighter and more compressed. What do you think? The structure is still there, but it's harder to follow, almost like the meat has been pressed together instead of just dried. And that's actually useful because now we're not just looking at beef jerky, we're starting to see that different brands can process the same basic ingredient in very different ways. So 400 times, I'm starting to think Jack Lynx and Tillamook didn't get the same memo. Tillamook practically rolled out a red carpet and said, here's my muscle structure. Jack Lynx, on the other hand, is making me work for it. The tissue looks much denser and a lot more compact, which is creating a very different microscopic appearance. Okay, at 1,000 times, I think we've seen enough to call this one. Jack Lynx and Tillamook may both be selling beef jerky, but under the scope, they're definitely not identical. And this is where things get crazy. Because when you're standing in a convenience store, all you have to go on is the packaging, right? Premium, original, high protein. But none of these words explain why these samples look so different. The microscope doesn't care about the marketing department. It just shows us what's there. Alrighty then. Great value at 40 times. And great value just threw my theory out the freaking window. I assume the least expensive bag would immediately look more processed under the microscope, but that's not what I'm seeing. Instead of one large continuous sheet of muscle, I'm seeing smaller pieces scattered across the slide. And here's the important part. Cheaper doesn't automatically mean fake. It just means different. Like you were in school. We've already seen two brands tell two completely different stories, and Great Value is adding a third. Okay, 100 times Great Value is starting to look a little off the hook. Instead of those long, easy to follow fibers we saw earlier, this sample looks like it's breaking apart into smaller, disconnected pieces. And honestly, that's becoming one of the biggest surprises in this experiment. I expected beef jerky to look like beef jerky. Apparently, the microscope had other plans. 400 times Great Value is carving out its own identity. Tillamook gave us a long muscle fiber. Jack Lynx looked dense and tightly packed. Great Value? It almost looks shredded. And that's fascinating because every one of these products is built around the same basic promise, beef. Yet under the microscope, they're behaving like completely different animals, literally. At 1,000 times, I think we've finally answered the question I started with. Are we paying for better beef? Honestly, I'm not convinced here. What I'm seeing instead is that every company processes its product differently. And under the microscope, those differences become impossible to ignore. And now, for your viewing pleasure, Slim Jim, the one everybody's been waiting for. And honestly, these images are hilarious. Tillamook looked like muscle. Jack Link's looked compressed. Great Value looked shredded. Slim Jim looks like a murder scene. The structure is so dense and blended together that the individual fibers become much harder to recognize, hence the price. So at 100 times, I'm starting to understand why Slim Jims have their own category in the gas station. Because this doesn't resemble anything we've looked at so far. The long fibers we saw in Tillamook are practically gone. The compact structure we saw in Jack Link's isn't really here either. The sample is doing its own weird little Slim Jim thing. So at 400 times, I think we've officially entered the uncharted territory. Remember all these words on the package? Original, smokehouse, high protein. None of these prepared me for this. Because if I mix up all the microscope slides and asked you to identify the Slim Jim, this would probably be the first one you'd pick. Am I right? So at 1,000 times, yes, we're looking at Slim Jims at 1,000 times more than what you see with your normal eyes. Scary. But I finally understand why Slim Jim has been using professional wrestlers in its commercials for decades, because whatever happened in the bag was clearly not gentle. And honestly, that's what makes this comparison so much fun. We started with 5 products that all claim to be beef jerky, but under the microscope, we've seen 5 completely different stories. And this one might be the wildest yet. So, what did we learn today? First, not all beef jerky is created equal. Second, apparently I've reached the point in my life where I'm putting dried meat under a microscope. And honestly, I'm okay with that. I think I was a weird one in school. Tillamook easily won the taste test, by far. Great Value surprised the hell out of me. Old Trapper looked fantastic under the microscope. And Slim Jim? Well, Slim Jim did Slim Jim things. And before you guys start typing angry comments, I know it's technically a meat stick. I know, relax. But here's the biggest takeaway, folks. More expensive doesn't automatically mean better. And sometimes the only way to find out is to take a closer look. Be good to yourself and others.